Remember this insanely viral mobile game from 2013 called Flappy Bird? This game was insanely popular, getting tens of millions of downloads and at some point reportedly generating $50,000 per day. Something else that is also very popular at this moment are horror games. So why not turn the iconic game Flappy Bird into a horror game? Oh, and I'm also going to make it in 3D instead of 2D. First things first, we need to create a new Unity project and add a sphere. I gave the sphere a rigid body so that it falls down because of gravity. Thanks Newton. And wrote some code so you can push it upwards with spacebar. I know, crazy. Then I made it so that you can look around with the mouse and that it pushes the sphere in the direction you are looking at. And this is quite literally all of the code we need for the player movement. Now Flappy Bird is an endless game, so we need some sort of procedural generation as the player moves forward. I just used the code that I made for another game and now we have some tiles that are getting spawned when the player moves forward. It basically checks if the player reaches the end of a tile, to then spawn a new tile prefab at the end of the last spawned tile. Now it is finally time to make some 3D art for the game, starting with turning the original Flappy Bird into a new 3D version. So how do we make a bird with a comically large mouth and no legs? Well, we simply just need to add a sphere and stretch it a bit, and before you know it we have... Look guys, I really tried, okay? You have to believe me. We just do a little bit more of sculpting, a little bit of extruding, and then we have... Oh, wrong model, my bad. Anyways, this looks a lot more like it. Just don't look at it for too long and you will be fine. Next up are the pipes. I mean, it is really not that special. It is literally just a cylinder. It took a longer time to texture this model than to make it. Also, I made this mutant version of the bird that looks like it comes straight out of a nightmare. You will see later why I made this, but for now let's just say he has had a rough week behind him. Now we have the two main models for the game. However, we are still flying above a placeholder tile, so let's fix that. I hopped into Blender again and made some environment based on the original game, with some grass, bushes and a city in the background. I exported it to Substance Painter to make some textures for it, and in my opinion it looks pretty nice. Also for the pipes I made it so that the bottom pipe gets a random height from a set range. Then the top pipe spawns on top of the bottom pipe and gets an offset on the y-axis to create a gap. This is really useful because you can just change the offset to create a smaller gap to make it harder when the player progresses. Now unless going outside and touching some grass is considered scary, this is not really a horror game quite yet. So to fix this I played around with the lighting and fog, and I added some post-processing and camera effects. This already looks a lot more like a horror game. However, it is not really Flappy Bird if you don't have some sort of score or progression. So I programmed it so that when you go through a gap you get 1 point. It is nice that you can get points now, however the player can just smash into the pipes and nothing will happen. So I made it so that when the player hits a pipe or the ground you can no longer move and look around, which causes the player to fall on the ground due to gravity. This is already starting to feel like a finished game. However, I still haven't told you why I made this mutant bird from earlier. Instead of making the gameplay like the original Flappy Bird, I also wanted to add something extra to make it more interesting. That is where this bird comes into place. You see, I want this bird to be an AI enemy you have to defeat every once in a while. So I got to work on creating the AI for the bird. That's when I realized that whenever I make AI for an enemy, it never goes right the first time, because I have no clue what is happening here. Luckily, I eventually got it working, and now the bird rises from the fog and starts to move around in front of the player. Now it is cool that the bird AI works, but it's just floating there, so we need a way for the enemy bird to attack the player, but also a way for the player to attack the enemy. I decided to make a timing minigame. When the player times correctly in the green area, the enemy gets defeated. But when you time in the red area, you get a jump scare. I also added a timer, and if you don't complete the minigame in that time, you also get a jump scare and lose the game. And when you progress in the game, the green area gets smaller and smaller over time. Now the only logical solution that came in mind for attacking the enemy are bird seeds. In order to attack the enemy, you need to have bird seeds. I made a seed model and a package model and wrote a script so you can collect bird seeds. Then, when you successfully complete the minigame, you shoot 4 bird seeds and enemy gets destroyed. I also made it that you lose a bird seed every few seconds, so you need to keep collecting birdseeds in order to keep flying. Now, besides the enemy bird and the birdseeds, I still want one more thing in the game to make it interesting. So I took the existing pipe model and simply made a hole in it. I programmed it so that when you progress in the game, you eventually also need to go through pipes with a hole to add an extra challenge. Okay, so the main gameplay loop is done. That means it is time to make the end screen and the main menu. For the end screen, I based it on the original game, with the score you got and your high score, which also gets saved. I also added some text that displays why we lost. For the main menu, it is rather simple. I added a title, and I know it may not be the best name for the game, but I just couldn't think of anything else. I also added the bird model from before, which you can move around with your mouse.
Hi, how are you?
Also, I forgot to mention, but I added a third person mode, which in my opinion makes the game even harder. Finally, one of the most important things in horror games are sound effects. And in my game there are exactly, well, 0. So we need to fix this. For the bird, I made some flapping sound effects when you hit something and when you shoot. And also for gaining a point, collecting birdseeds, defeating the enemy, some ambience in the background, and my favorite, the jump scare. After I finished making the sound effects, the game is now also finished. So here's some footage of me playing the game in the middle of the night for some reason. I really enjoyed making this game and making a 3D version of a 2D game, but also adding my own spin to it. And I'm happy how the game turned out. Anyways, this is it for me, thanks for watching and until the next one.